Hello and welcome to episode 24 of Snack Break, the perfect podcast popcorn where preparing your cup of tea or ideal snack or beverage. In this episode, we're going to be talking all things The Mandalorian and Grogu, the Star Wars cinematic universe's first theatrical outing since 2019's The Rise of Skywalker. We're going to be talking all about that, reviewing that in depth, and in a brand new feature, Bendigo's Book Club. Yeah, you've got to use that alliteration. Bendigo Blues Book Club, if you want to go for the full title. We're going to be discussing Dungeon Crawler Carl, or the much praised, I should say, Dungeon Crawler Carl, Book 1 by Matt Dinniman. So, without further ado, let's get into the show. I have to say, my feelings are very much mixed about this one. On the one hand, at least in terms of critical analysis, it's a little bit of a struggle. The first Star Wars film in over 6 years resurrects the franchise's cinema origins, only to deliver a film with utterly no recognisable story structure. Of course, not every film could or should have to follow a perfect 3-act structure, and rules are made to be broken, but a film occasionally disregards this structure to such an extent that I can't help but make it one of my most significant takeaways from it. As an aside here, I had a similar experience with The Wild Robot, the opening 30 minutes of which are sort of akin to an entire movie unto themselves, which I found to be quite a distracting and somewhat disorientating feature with regard to that film. This film, especially for the first hour or so, operates on a bizarre loop of just repeated cause and effect, and with its strange, clunky shifting story beats, it's not hard to imagine how this plot may have originally been conceived as a 4th season for the TV show from which it draws its characters, where different plot points and story beats would have been more neatly divided up between episodes. All that being said, I found it hard not to have an irresistibly good time here. Sure, it's by no means the perfect movie, but it's better than the last Star Wars movie, and if you're willing to embrace it, then there's undoubtedly a certain thrill to be had from seeing fully fledged Star Wars ripping up the big screen once again. To be able to experience these characters in full cinematic excellence from facing movie-sized threats is simply a joy. Despite its oddly disjointed nature, the plot is entertainingly solid overall, although no efforts are made to explain to new viewers, or to be frank, even viewers who have watched the show, how exactly the protagonists end up at the film's starting point. They're just sort of there. Nonetheless, there does remain a joyful, silly, and occasionally heartfelt exhilaration to this movie that still makes it an undeniably good time. I do think that non-Star Wars fanatics will be less likely to embrace the quirks and flaws of this film, although for those who can, I truly think that there's a lot to be gained from this space cowboy adventure. Overall, although The Mandalorian and Grogu may have only occasionally shonky effects, strange tonal shifts, and an absolutely random plot structure, it still offers laughs and thrills in this action-packed tour of the Star Wars galaxy. It's not trying to redefine the series by any means, but it's all the better for it, prioritising well-realised, action-packed fun over unnecessary scale. And on Letterboxd, I gave this 3.5 stars out of 5. That is The Mandalorian and Grogu. Time now for Bendigo's Book Club, a brand new feature on the show where we're going to be talking about, as you guessed it, books. Now, I'm not going to be doing this in the same way as we do our movie reviews on the podcast, where I sort of talk about a film regardless of whether I like it or not, where you can sort of throw a bit more weight at the studio as a whole and sort of shake hand at fist. I'm not really going to talk about books that I don't enjoy here because it seems a little bit harsh just to throw shade at an author in particular. Obviously, most books are a team effort and there's editors and publishers, or even in a self-published book, there'll be a whole variety of people involved with it. But still, it's a little bit more of an individual process. So I'm largely going to be using this as a space to share some of the books that I've really, really enjoyed over the last little bit. Recently, I have dived into Book 1, Novel 1 of Dungeon Crawler Carl, otherwise known to you more familiar with the fandom as DCC. And for those of you who are somehow unaware, Dungeon Crawler Carl is the lit RPG behemoth that has exploded to massive global success over the last couple of years. It's written by Matt Dinniman, who prior to publishing Dungeon Crawler Carl was out of work due to the COVID pandemic, and he self-published, originally writing on Royal Road and publishing on Royal Road. He self-published a whole series of Dungeon Crawler Carl lit RPG books. For those unaware, that's literary RPG, in which the book itself and the mechanics of the book follows a game-like mechanic. Very sort of heavily video games inspired, quite big with, and I count myself to be part of this, quite big with this sort of nerd and video game community, which is why we're talking about it here. And it's just gone to massive heights. The first I'm sort of, this is off the top of my head. I believe I heard this the other day. The first book, self-published, sold something like 600,000 copies, which is obviously a massive self-publishing success. And the latest book, book 8 of the planned 10-book series, A Parade of Horribles, debuted at number 1 the New York Times bestseller list and has sold over 10, or this, is it that book individually? There's something in the series that's sold 10 million copies. Basically, it's a massive success. It's now been bought up by one of the big 5 and is being published. I can't quite figure out who it is because this is a real side tangent, but I recently got book 2. And the first copy is the book 1, Dungeon Crawler Carl, as it's aptly titled, has got the Ace logo on the side, and it's quite a bit. Is it shorter? No, it's shorter. It's shorter, and obviously, but book 2 is the only one where I think it gets short, or it's shorter than the first one. It's the shortest book in the series, but it's got a little MJ logo with somebody, a sort of mermaid or merman or merperson holding a book, and it's a different shape. It's slightly different shape and size, which does bother me slightly. I've been hoping that if I ordered it off Amazon, as I got with the Ace one, that it would be the same, but it's not. Anyway, it's been a massive success around the world now. There's been spin-offs. There's going to be a TV show. We're going to be talking about that in just a little bit, but it's a really big success. Now, what did I think of it, though? Because I eventually ended up reading this. I got the book a while ago and just didn't really get around to reading it because it is quite a big book. In terms of writing style, I think Dinniman expertly blends sort of very creative description with some humorous bits in there. I believe the original, there's so many covers for this book, but one of the original self-published editions had a quote on it that sort of argued that it brought with it a slightly Hitchhiker's Guide humor style to it, which I really enjoy. It's not quite to that level of, I don't mean in terms of skill, because obviously Douglas Adams was incredibly skilled in his writing as a whole, but particularly his use of humor. It's not that level in terms of humor skill, because nobody is, or very few people are, I should say. But also there's just not as much humor as those books. But there's some really funny bits in there. There's creative description and effective prose, and it manages all of this without being too top heavy in artistic flair. And, I like a bit of fancy writing here and there, but I really like it. I really like sort of the slightly more laid back approach here. And I don't mean that in a negative way in the slightest, because I said the description is very creative and there is effective prose. It's just, it really effectively reflects the first person nature of this book, the sort of language that Dinniman uses in the voice of Carl. And it makes for a consistently pick-upable reader experience, basically the whole way through, for what is, even for book 1, still a pretty long book. It's about 450 pages long if you include the little bonus backstage, the Pineapple Cabaret, which actually sort of links into a part of the book, and I enjoyed a lot more than I'd expected to. One thing that I want to talk about that I think is pretty interesting is the fact that I hadn't really expected this. Maybe this is perhaps just because I don't read that many series, and people who read lots of series will be more familiar with this. But Dinniman originally published the first few novels on Royal Road. Or was it? It might have only just been the first one or two. I don't know specifics. But he published first section of the series on Royal Road. As a number of lit RPG authors have, millions, and amongst the very successful ones, quite a few have originally published on Royal Road. And then I believe it's from about book 2 onwards that Dinniman opened up a Patreon where he would publish chapters. And he still does this, even as, at the stage of massive global success that he's at. He publishes he publishes chapters semi-regularly on Patreon, and I mean, the man clearly writes very quickly. Some of those early books came out incredibly quickly, and even now, publishing several 100-page long novel, or well over 400 pages, most of them, which is length this opening novel, and he still publishes it on Patreon, and you can sort of see the working progress of, because I'm not a member of the Patreon, I don't know how much changes between novel and original, but you can see the working progress of what becomes a full Dungeon Crawler Carl novel, and the patrons end up suggesting a lot of things. I know there's an item later in the book called the Dungeon Anarchist's Cookbook. That's not a spoiler. It's the title of book 3, and that apparently becomes huge in the overall story of the series, and that was originally suggested by a patron. So, point is, it's sort of written. It's published in sort of quite a similar way, and this sort of struck me as I read it, like a soap opera or manga. And maybe this is just because I'm unfamiliar. I don't read a lot of series, but it does read to me, as I mentioned, like a soap opera or manga. Even the conclusion of this first book, which does end on a slight cliffhanger, it certainly doesn't follow. And this is like a very joyful thing with novels, that they don't have to follow 3-act structure in the same way that a 2-hour movie or 1.5-hour movie or whatever maybe would have to. But it's certainly got an interesting structure to it. And you do get a bit of the sense that, yes, this is a very longer, and of course you can get it, it's a series, but the overarching nature of it is very apparent. But I have to say, I really enjoyed it. It didn't bother me. And so I do want to hear, if you're a Dungeon Crawler Carl reader and you're a super fan, please do let me know. Is this something that's apparent through the whole series? And are you somebody who blasts through it all? Is it worth just me going on? Because I read about 3 other books while I had this book on the go, because it is quite a long book. And so I'd pick it up, once or twice a day or every other day or whatever was suiting me at the time. And it worked very well just to sort of enjoy it almost like One Piece or something. I really liked it in that regard. And on the whole, that's just a specific point I want to bring up. On the whole, I really, really enjoyed the book. Really a great first book. I hear a lot of people say this, and I have to say I really just did agree with the mass consensus here. There's a surprising amount of emotion in there, and one of the reasons I'm going to be so motivated to go forward and read, hopefully, the rest of the series, certainly book 2, which I've got, as I mentioned, is the fact that there's a lot of emotional depth in there, and things are very nicely teed up that are hopefully going to be paid off later in the series. My main question right now, and this is not a spoiler, but it's who is Ferdinand? I don't know. Hopefully I'll find out. Anywho, aside from that, I do just want to bring up very quickly before we wrap up this episode's segment of Bendigo's Book Club, there is a Dungeon Crawler Carl TV show coming out. It's from Peacock, that's the network, and the studio is Fuzzy Door and Universal Global Television. Executive producers include Seth MacFarlane, Erica Huggins, Chris Yost, and Matt Dinniman himself, which is great. And it's been written by Chris Yost, who's known for The Mandalorian and Thor Ragnarok. That all sounds like very good stuff. Again, only time will tell. But the most exciting thing I want to talk about right now is the fact that very recently, at the San Diego Comic-Con, it was revealed, and if you don't want to know anything about the show, you can click off here, but it was revealed that the casting for Princess Donut, the Princess Royal Chunk, whatever, I don't have that quite off by heart, the amazing Princess Donut is going to be voiced by Jeff Hayes, who is the, dare I say, universally appreciated narrator of the Dungeon Crawler Carl audiobook series. Now, I haven't listened to the audiobook. I've decided to go through with the books first, just because I think they're nice books. I know, and I do think the original covers are very cool, but I actually really like the sort of globally published hardcover editions, and you've got the etchings on them. I do think they're quite cool, even in the, in the simplistic style. I actually think it does end up looking quite cool, in the same way that the original covers had their own unique coolness to them, for lack of a better term. And I do wish those were still available online, sadly not. But the point is, Jeff Hayes, and I do want to go back and listen to the audiobooks at some stage, perhaps to recap before I read book 2, because Jeff Hayes is supposed to be so good. You can go onto Matt Dinniman's website and just hear a little clip of him doing all the different characters. And I mean, there's been memes all over the place, just cast Jeff Hayes as the whole show. But I have to say, I'm just really, really pleased that Jeff Hayes will be able to bring that level of character and that persona and character and personality to Princess Donut, the Royal Anchonk or whatever, because I just think it is the best way to get him in there, and rightly so, because he is so well liked for being in the show. He's recognised being so incredibly talented, and I'm absolutely delighted. So please, let us know your thoughts on Dungeon Crawler Carl and that casting, or the franchise as a whole. You can email us at hwsnapratepodcast@gmail.com, or you can leave your thoughts in the comments down below. That is it for this episode of Snap Rate, the perfect podcast pop on while preparing a cup of tea or ideal snack or beverage. Thank you very, very much for listening. I have been Bendigo Blue. This has been a Hungry Cat Bar production. Coming up over the next few weeks on the podcast, we've got lots of big movies coming out. Moana live action. I'm hopefully going to go see. It's a critical box office failure. but I'm curious to see if it's any good. The Odyssey, Spider-Man Brand New Day, so many big films coming out at the moment, and even some really exciting ones dropping in this later bit of the summer. So thank you very, very much for listening. If you'd like to hear more, you can follow us on Spotify or subscribe on YouTube. Have a good day. See you soon. Stay safe. Bye-bye.